The office was still dark when Jacob Miller sat down at his desk, opened his email, and typed 3 sentences he had been writing in his head all night long. 12 years. Not a single sick day. Not a single complaint. And then send. No one understood why. No one knew what he had seen the evening before, sitting in the hallway outside his daughter's bedroom, listening to the silence where her laughter used to live. The weeks that followed cost him almost everything. The months after that cost him the rest. He told himself it was worth it. He wasn't sure he believed it anymore. Then came the night a black car rolled slowly to a stop in front of his small house engine, off headlights cutting through the dark. The woman who stepped out wasn't a neighbor, wasn't a stranger. She was the last person on earth Jacob expected to see at his door, and she wasn't leaving without telling him the truth. Jacob had always been the kind of man who arrived early and left late. Not out of ambition, he had stopped chasing promotions somewhere around year 7, but out of habit, and out of something quieter than habit, the belief that showing up was the least a person could do. Nexus Corp had given him a desk, a salary, and a reason to get dressed in the morning. He had given it 12 years in return. That felt like a fair trade. For a long time, it was. Rachel used to joke that he loved his spreadsheets more than he loved her. He would laugh and deny it, and she would laugh too. And Emily, little Emily, barely 5 years old at the time, would laugh without knowing why, just because her parents were laughing. Those evenings felt endless in the best possible way. The 3 of them crowded into a kitchen that was too small for a family, and somehow exactly right. Then the accident happened. A rainy Tuesday in March 3 years ago. A driver who ran a red light. Rachel never made it to the hospital. Emily was in school when it happened, so she heard the news from Jacob, who had no idea how to deliver it, who sat across from his daughter at the kitchen table and could not find a single word that felt true enough. He said, "Mom isn't coming home." Emily looked at him for a long moment, then looked down at her hands. She didn't cry. That scared him more than anything. In the months that followed, Jacob watched his daughter, the way a man watches a crack in the ceiling, hoping it won't spread, knowing it will. Emily still went to school, still ate dinner, still drew pictures at the kitchen table the way she always had. But something had shifted behind her eyes. Some interior light dimmed so gradually that Jacob kept telling himself he was imagining it. He was not imagining it. By the time Emily turned 8, she had almost stopped talking at school entirely. Her teacher called once to say that Emily sat alone at lunch, then called again to say that some of the other kids had started making comments, cruel, careless things the way children can be cruel without understanding what cruelty costs. Things about not having a mother. Emily, according to the teacher, had not responded at all, had not cried, had not fought back, had simply sat with her hands folded in her lap and stared at a fixed point on the wall. Jacob had taken that call standing in the parking garage at Nexus Corp, his car keys pressed hard into his palm. He told the teacher he understood. He thanked her. He hung up and stood in the concrete dark for a long time. He started leaving work earlier after that. 30 minutes, sometimes an hour. It was never enough. There was always a report due. Always one more call. Always a manager stopping him in the hallway to talk about quarterly targets. The office operated on the assumption that everyone inside it had no life outside it. And for a long time, Jacob had quietly accepted that assumption. Now, it was costing him something he couldn't afford to lose. The night that changed everything, Jacob came home just past 9 o'clock. The house was dark, except for the small lamp in the hallway Emily knew to leave it on for him. He set his bag down by the door and was about to call her name when he saw her. She was sitting on the floor of the living room, back against the couch, knees pulled to her chest. The room was nearly black around her. In her hands, she held a piece of paper, and even from the doorway, Jacob could see what it was: a drawing she had made crayon on white construction paper, a picture of 3 figures standing together. A man, a girl, and in the space where the third figure had been, there was only a gray smear. She had erased it, pressed so hard the paper had torn slightly at the edge. Jacob stood in the doorway and could not move. He wanted to cross the room and pull her close and say something, anything that might reach her. But the look on Emily's face stopped him. She wasn't crying. She wasn't staring at the drawing. She was looking at nothing at all the way someone looks when they have already made peace with something the rest of the world hasn't noticed yet. He put her to bed that night without mentioning what he had seen. He made her a cup of warm milk, the way Rachel used to sat on the edge of her mattress and read 2 chapters of the book they had been working through. Together, an adventure story about a girl who sailed across oceans with a crew of unlikely companions. Emily listened with her eyes open. When he turned off the light, she said goodnight in a voice so small it barely existed. Jacob went back to the kitchen, sat down at the table, and stared at the wall. The next morning, he went to his supervisor's office before anyone else had arrived. He asked if there was any possibility of a remote arrangement, even partial 3 days a week, so he could be home more for his daughter. His supervisor was not unkind about it. He explained carefully that the company didn't have a formal policy for remote work at Jacob's level, that it would set a precedent, that he understood Jacob's situation was difficult, but that his hands were tied. Jacob nodded. He thanked the man. He returned to his desk. For 2 hours he sat there and looked at the work in front of him without seeing it. What he was seeing instead was Emily on the floor of the living room with her erased drawing. Emily not reacting when children said cruel things about her dead mother. Emily drinking warm milk in a voice that barely existed. He thought, if I lose her, what exactly am I holding on to all of this for? It was not a dramatic thought. It arrived quietly, the way the most important thoughts do not. As a bolt of lightning, but as a door swinging open in a hallway you've walked 100 times, leading somewhere you somehow never noticed before. He opened his email. He wrote 3 sentences. He submitted his resignation effective immediately, citing a personal family emergency. By noon, the news had moved through the office, the way news always does, fast and slightly distorted. A colleague named Marcus stopped by his desk, a man Jacob had eaten lunch with nearly every workday for 6 years, and just looked at him for a moment before saying anything. "Tell me you have something lined up," Marcus said. Jacob was clearing the photographs from his desk. Emily at 4, missing her front teeth. Emily and Rachel at the ocean, both of them squinting into the sun. He placed them carefully into a cardboard box. "I don't," he said. Marcus pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. He was the kind of person who always said the practical thing first and the honest thing second. "Jacob, this is not a decision you make in one morning." "I know," Jacob said. "You have a mortgage. You have a kid in school." "I know that too." Marcus looked at the photographs going into the box. He looked at Jacob, and something in his expression shifted from practical concern to something more careful, more searching. "How bad is it?" he asked. "With Emily." Jacob set the last photograph, the one of Rachel at the ocean, face down in the box. "Bad enough," he said. He carried the box out through the lobby without stopping. A few people looked up from their screens. His supervisor was standing near the elevators and started to say something, but Jacob kept walking. Not because he was angry, not because he wanted to make a point, simply because there was nothing left in that building worth slowing down for. He picked Emily up from school that afternoon 2 hours earlier than she expected. She came through the doors and stopped when she saw him surprised. "Is everything okay?" she asked. "Everything's okay," Jacob said. "I just thought we could go get ice cream." Emily studied him with the particular seriousness of a child who has learned to read adults carefully. Then very slowly, something in her face unlocked. Not a smile exactly. Something smaller than a smile and larger than relief. "Okay," she said. They got ice cream from the place 2 blocks from school. Jacob got coffee. Emily got strawberry. They sat outside at a metal table. Even though the air was cool, and Emily ate slowly and didn't say much, and Jacob watched her and thought, this, whatever it costs this. He didn't know yet what it would cost, but he was about to find out. The first week felt almost manageable. Jacob told himself that was a good sign. He dropped Emily off at school each morning, came home, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open and a list of job listings in front of him. He applied to 7 positions in the first 3 days, then 4 more, then 6. The work was tedious and familiar, tailoring cover letters, adjusting, formatting, writing, and rewriting the same paragraph about his professional experience in slightly different configurations for slightly different audiences. He was good at this kind of careful, patient labor. He had always been good at it. What he had not anticipated was how quickly the rejections would come, or how many of them would say the same thing in different ways. One was too direct about it. A gap in your recent employment history gives us some concern. Another didn't bother explaining at all, just a 2-line email thanking him for his time. 2 companies invited him to interviews, and then withdrew the offers when they confirmed the positions required full-time fixed hours, in-office presence 5 days a week. Jacob had been honest about his situation. That honesty, it turned out, was expensive. The savings he had set aside 3 months' worth, carefully accumulated, began to shrink faster than he had projected. The mortgage alone took 1/3 of it. Utilities, groceries, Emily's school, supplies, the small things that added up into something that felt large. It was all moving in one direction, and that direction wasn't good. One afternoon, about 6 weeks in, Jacob stood in the grocery store with a basket over one arm and a rough count running in his head. He had been doing this for 2 weeks by then, calculating before he reached the register, moving through the aisles with a specific number already fixed in his mind. He picked up a carton of orange juice and set it back down. Picked up a different brand, cheaper by $1.40, and put that one in the basket instead. He moved to the next aisle and did the same with pasta sauce with bread, with the particular brand of cereal that Emily liked. He swapped it for the store brand and hoped she wouldn't notice. He was reaching for a package of chicken at the back of the refrigerator case when he felt that specific, prickling awareness of being watched. He turned and found Emily standing 2 feet behind him, holding the box of cereal he had just put back on the shelf. She wasn't saying anything. She was just looking at him with those careful, serious eyes of hers, the ones that saw more than an 8-year-old should. He hadn't realized she'd drifted over from the next aisle. "That's not the one we usually get," Emily said. It wasn't an accusation. It was an observation delivered in the same quiet, measured way she said most things now. "I know," Jacob said. "I thought we'd try something new." Emily looked at the box, then at him, then put the box back on the shelf exactly where she'd found it. She didn't push further. She never pushed. That too was something he was still learning to read, whether her silence meant she had accepted the answer or simply chosen not to challenge it. They finished the shopping and drove home without talking much. Emily sat in the passenger seat and looked out the window at the passing houses, the bare trees, the flat gray of an overcast afternoon. Jacob kept both hands on the wheel and thought about the balance in his checking account, and then made himself stop thinking about it. The progress with Emily, when it came, arrived the way most good things did, without announcement, and almost too small to name. It was a Saturday 7 weeks after Jacob had left Nexus Corp. He was standing at the kitchen counter, not doing anything in particular, staring at the middle distance, the way a person does when their thoughts have gotten ahead of them. Emily came in from the hallway, still in her pajamas, hair loose around her face. She stopped in the kitchen doorway. "Dad," she said, "can we make cookies today?" Jacob turned to look at her. It took him a moment to process the question, not because it was complicated, but because it was so ordinary, and ordinary had become something he was no longer used to. Emily asking for something, Emily wanting to do something together, Emily using his name in that easy, natural way, instead of approaching him with the careful hesitation that had become her default. "Yeah," he said. and he was surprised by how steady his voice came out. "Yeah, we can do that." They made chocolate chip cookies from a recipe Rachel had kept folded inside the cover of an old cookbook. Emily stood on the step stool she'd outgrown 2 years ago and still used anyway, measuring out flour with a concentration that suggested the fate of something important depended on getting it exactly right. She laughed once when Jacob dropped an egg and it cracked on the wrong side of the bowl. It was a short laugh, and she covered it quickly with the back of her hand, as though she had surprised herself. But it was there. It was real. Jacob held on to that laugh for the rest of the day, like a man holds on to something in a current. That night, after Emily had gone to bed, he sat at the kitchen table with the stack of bills spread out in front of him and tried to make the numbers work. He rearranged them. He cross-referenced what was due against what he had. He made a new column and added up the job applications he had submitted, 23 at last count, with 3 still pending responses. He thought about the laugh. He thought about whether a laugh could justify a stack of bills you couldn't pay. He thought about what it meant to choose your child's mental health over financial stability, and whether that was courage or whether it was just a different kind of failure dressed up in better language. He didn't have an answer. He closed the laptop and went to bed. The letter from the landlord arrived on a Tuesday, slipped under the door in a white envelope with the property management company's logo in the corner. Jacob opened it at the kitchen table, read it once, then read it again to make sure he had understood it correctly. 2 months behind. He had not realized it had become 2 months he had been paying in partial amounts, telling himself he would make it up, and somewhere in the arithmetic of denial the number had doubled. They had 1 week before formal proceedings would begin. Jacob put the letter face down on the table. He sat for a moment. Then he picked up his phone and called his cousin Danny, who lived 2 states over and had always been in the comfortable way of certain relatives, slightly more financially stable than anyone else in the family. They hadn't spoken in several months. Danny answered on the 3rd ring, sounding surprised, and then cautious the way people sound when they sense the conversation might cost them something. Jacob explained the situation plainly. He didn't dress it up or exaggerate. He asked for enough to cover the 2 months in arrears and 1 month forward just to buy himself time. There was a long silence on the line before Danny spoke. "Jacob," his cousin said, "I'm not going to pretend this is anything other than what it is. You made a decision, and now you're in a hole because of it." Another moment then. "I can't be the one to dig you out of this one. You did this to yourself." The call ended shortly after. Jacob set the phone down on the table next to the letter and looked around the kitchen. The step stool Emily still used was pushed against the cabinet where they'd left it after the cookies. The old cookbook with Rachel's recipe folded inside was still on the counter. Across the hallway, he could see the wall of the living room where Emily had taped up a new drawing last week. 2 figures standing in front of a house with a yellow sun in the upper corner. He had not looked at it closely enough to see what else was in it. He felt sitting there that he was losing on all fronts simultaneously. The money, the stability, and underneath those, quieter but heavier, the fear that he had made a decision that sounded like love and might turn out to be something closer to selfishness. Emily needed a father who was present, yes, but Emily also needed a roof, a working refrigerator, a school year that wasn't interrupted by an eviction. He had given her his time and taken away her security. He wasn't sure those things balanced out. The night before the deadline, Jacob sat alone at the kitchen table, long after the house had gone dark around him. He had not turned on the overhead light, just the small lamp from the hallway casting a long rectangle across the floor. The letter was still on the table. He had stopped looking at it hours ago. Now he just sat with his hands flat against the surface of the table, very still, not thinking about anything concrete, which was its own kind of thinking. He heard the sound of Emily's door before he saw her, a soft creak, then small footsteps in the hallway. She appeared at the kitchen doorway in her oversized sleep shirt, hair tangled from the pillow blinking against the dim light. She looked at him. He looked at her. Jacob straightened and tried to arrange his face into something that would not worry her. "Hey, Bug, go back to bed." Emily didn't move. She stood at the edge of the kitchen and looked at him with that expression he had come to know too well, older than 8, measuring something he couldn't name. Then she crossed the kitchen without a word, stopped at the table, and set down a small folded piece of paper beside his hand. She turned and went back down the hallway. Her door clicked shut. Jacob looked at the paper for a moment before picking it up. He unfolded it carefully. It was a drawing crayon on white paper, the same construction paper she always used. 2 figures holding hands, one tall and one small, standing beneath something that might have been a sun or might have been a large yellow flower. Above the drawing, in the round, uneven handwriting of a child, still learning to keep her letters between the lines, Emily had written, "Don't be sad, Dad. Having you is enough." Jacob set the paper down flat on the table. He pressed both palms over his eyes and sat like that for a long time, not falling apart exactly, not breaking, but absorbing something. The sentence had found the exact place in his chest where his certainty had been wearing thin, and it sat there, warm and unbearable in equal measure. It didn't solve anything. Not the letter, not the money, not the week ahead. But it kept him in the chair, and for that night, that was the only thing that mattered. He called the property management office first thing the next morning and negotiated an additional 2 weeks long enough. He told himself to figure something out. He wasn't sure what that something was. But the drawing was still on the table when he hung up the phone, and it seemed important to stay in motion. The following evening, Jacob was standing at the kitchen sink, rinsing the dinner plates, when headlights swept across the window. He didn't think much of it at first. Cars passed the house all the time, neighbors coming home from work, delivery trucks turning around in the cul-de-sac. He set a plate in the drying rack and reached for the next one. Then the engine cut out. He looked through the window. A dark car had parked at the curb directly in front of the house. Not a neighbor's car, not anything he recognized. It sat there, engine off, for long enough that Jacob dried his hands on the dish towel and moved toward the front window to get a better look. The car door opened. A woman stepped out. She was dressed in a dark coat, her hair pulled back, and she moved with the kind of unhurried, certain posture that belongs to people who have spent years walking into rooms and immediately becoming the most important person in them. She looked at the house number, then at the door, then started up the front walk. Jacob opened the door before she reached the porch. He recognized her immediately, and the recognition landed somewhere between confusion and something colder. Sophia Carter, CEO of Nexus Corp. He had seen her in person perhaps a dozen times over 12 years, at company-wide meetings, at the occasional floor walk-through, once at a holiday event, where she had shaken his hand and thanked him for his tenure. She was not the kind of executive who learned the names of data analysts. He had always assumed she didn't know his. "Mr. Miller," she said. She stopped at the base of the porch steps. "I know this is unexpected. I apologize for coming without calling. First, I wasn't sure you'd pick up." Jacob stayed in the doorway. "How do you know where I live?" "Marcus Webb gave me your address." She said it evenly without apology. "He brought up your situation at an internal review meeting 2 weeks ago. It took him that long to decide it was worth raising. And when he did, he framed it carefully. A discussion about company culture, specifically whether the company was doing enough for employees with dependents. He didn't intend it as a complaint. He was making a point. But I listened, and I looked into it, and eventually I decided that a phone call wasn't going to be sufficient." She glanced past him into the hallway briefly. "I won't take much of your time, but I'd like to talk if you're willing." Jacob stood there for a moment. Behind him, from the direction of Emily's room, he could hear the low sound of her tablet. She was watching something before bed, the volume turned down low the way he had asked her to keep it. He stepped back from the door. "Come in," he said. He made coffee because it was the thing to do when someone was sitting at your kitchen table and the conversation was going to be difficult. Sophia sat with her coat still on, and her hands folded on the table, not looking around the kitchen, the way most visitors did, taking inventory, making quiet assessments. She looked at him. He set a mug in front of her and sat across from her with his own. "You didn't have to come here," Jacob said. "No," Sophia agreed. "I didn't." He waited. Sophia looked down at the mug for a moment, then back up at him. When she spoke, her voice had shifted, still measured, but something underneath it was different. Less executive. More human. "I'm not here as your former employer. I want to be clear about that from the start. What I'm about to tell you has nothing to do with legal liability or company policy, or any of the things that a CEO would normally come to someone's home to discuss." She wrapped both hands around the mug. "I'm here because Marcus told me what you did and why you did it, and I recognized it. I recognized it in a way that made it difficult to do nothing." Jacob said nothing. He let her continue. 12 years ago, Sophia said, "I had a son. He was 6. I was in the middle of building what eventually became Nexus Corp's current structure. It was a critical period, the kind of period where you tell yourself everything depends on the next 18 months, and then the 18 months end, and you find another reason why you still can't step back." She stopped, not for effect, but the way people stop when they're choosing their words carefully, because the words matter. "His name is Daniel. He's 18 now. He graduated high school in the spring." A beat. "His stepfather was there. I was in Singapore for a conference." The kitchen was quiet. From down the hallway, Emily's tablet had gone silent. She had probably fallen asleep. "I made the calculation that I could make up the lost time later," Sophia continued. "I told myself I was building something that would eventually give us more time together, more security, a better life. That's what we tell ourselves, isn't it? That the sacrifice is temporary." Her voice didn't waver, but something behind her eyes was very still. "Daniel doesn't call me. He's not cruel about it. He's a good person, kinder than I deserved him to be. He simply doesn't need me the way he once did, and I was the one who taught him not to." She looked directly at Jacob. "I missed the years when it was still possible for me to be the person he needed most. You can't go back to those years. There is no version of making up for them." Jacob had not moved. He had his hands around his own mug, and he was looking at this woman, this person he had always seen, only in the context of boardrooms and quarterly summaries, and finding someone else underneath entirely. "Jacob," Sophia said, and it was the first time she had used his first name. "You did something I didn't have the courage to do, and I can't sit in my office knowing that what you did is being punished by circumstances when I have it within my power to change the circumstances." He leaned back slightly. "What does that mean?" Sophia straightened. The executive register came back into her voice, but it didn't erase what had just come before it. It sat on top of it. "For the past 2 years, I've been developing a flexible work framework within Nexus Corp. Remote first positions, restructured hours, output-based evaluation rather than time-based. The legal and HR groundwork is done. The pilot program is ready. What I've been missing is someone credible, someone with a proven record, someone whose work quality I can point to be the first through the door." She met his eyes. "I'm offering you your job back. Not the same job. A senior analyst role fully remote. Flexible hours, structured around your availability rather than the office's schedule. The salary is higher than your previous position. And in exchange, you help me prove that this model works, because if it works for you, I can extend it to every employee in the company who needs it." Jacob looked at her for a long time. "Why does it have to be me?" he said. Sophia's expression shifted. Something moved across it that might have been the closest she allowed herself to come to emotion in a situation like this. "Because the story matters," she said. "Not for publicity, not for the company's image. Personally, it matters to me personally. I need to see at least one person prove that choosing your family doesn't mean losing everything else. I need to know that's possible. A beat. Because I didn't let myself find out, and I've been living with that for 12 years. Jacob looked down at the table. Emily's drawing was still there, the two figures holding hands, the uneven handwriting above them. Don't be sad, Dad. Having you is enough. He had not moved it since the night before. He thought about what it had felt like to send that resignation email, the strange lightness of it, and the terror underneath the lightness. He thought about the grocery store and the cereal box, and Emily standing behind him with her careful eyes. He thought about the cookie dough on the counter, and the laugh she had tried to cover with the back of her hand. He thought about Rachel, and what she would have said, not about the job, not about the money, but about this moment specifically. The knowing look she would have given him from across whatever room they were standing in. I'd need it in writing, he said. The terms, the flexibility, all of it. That's already prepared, Sophia said. I'll have it to you tomorrow morning. Jacob picked up his coffee mug and held it without drinking from it. And if it doesn't work, if the model doesn't prove out the way you're hoping, then we adjust, Sophia said. Your position is guaranteed regardless of the outcome of the pilot. I'm not asking you to take a risk. I'm asking you to take an opportunity. He set the mug down. Okay, he said. Sophia stood. She pulled her coat closed and picked up her bag from the floor beside the chair. Jacob walked her to the front door. On the porch, she turned back, and for a moment, she looked less like a CEO and more like a person standing in the cold with something unfinished behind her eyes. Take care of her, Sophia said. It wasn't a professional closing. It was something she meant. I will, Jacob said. He watched the black car pull away from the curb and disappear down the street. Then he went back inside and stood in the hallway for a moment, letting the quiet of the house settle around him. He walked down the hall to Emily's room and opened the door a few inches. She was asleep, one arm thrown over the edge of the mattress, hair across her face. The tablet was dark on the nightstand. He stood there for a while, just watching her breathe. The months that followed were not perfect. Nothing about the adjustment was seamless. There were days when the deadlines stacked up and the house felt too small, and Jacob had to take calls in the backyard, while Emily did her homework at the kitchen table inside. There were days when Emily was quiet again, in the old way, closed off and unreachable, and Jacob would sit with her after dinner and not push, just stay present. The way he had learned was sometimes the only thing that helped. But there were more of the other days, the days that accumulated into something that looked slowly like a life that worked. He was usually at the kitchen table by the time Emily came down for breakfast. She would pour herself cereal, the brand she actually liked, which they could afford again, and settle in across from him, and they would sit together in the easy, unspoken rhythm of two people who had gotten used to sharing a space without needing it to be anything more than what it was. Emily went back to drawing with the intensity she'd had before the years of quiet filling pages, taping things to walls, leaving stacks of construction paper on every available surface. She started telling Jacob about things at school, small stories that unspooled over dinner characters and incidents and injustices of the playground, delivered with the particular narrative energy of a child who has rediscovered the pleasure of being listened to. One afternoon in early spring, Emily came in from school and dropped her backpack by the door with a thud that suggested either triumph or catastrophe. She came into the kitchen, pulled out the chair across from Jacob, and sat down with the slightly performative sigh of a person who has had a day. Mrs. Patterson gave us a drawing assignment, Emily announced, and I finished mine in class and she put it on the board. Jacob looked up from his laptop. Yeah, the whole board, Emily said. She said it with careful, studied casualness, which was how she conveyed things she was actually proud of. "That's pretty great bug," he said. Emily shrugged in the way that meant she agreed completely. Then she reached into her backpack and pulled out the drawing Mrs. Patterson had taken it off the board and let her bring it home. She pushed it across the table to him. Jacob picked it up. It was a house with yellow light in the windows, 2 figures standing in the front yard, one tall, one small, both of them looking up at something above the frame of the paper. The sky was a deep layered blue that Emily had built up in careful strokes, darker at the edges, lighter in the center, with something that might have been a moon or might have been a window of light cut open in the dark. Underneath, in handwriting that had grown steadier and more her own since the fall, she had written, "Home." Jacob set the drawing down on the table. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he stood, went to the drawer in the hallway where he kept things he didn't want to lose, and took out the old drawing, the one from years ago, the 3-figure family portrait with the gray smear where the third person had been erased. He brought it back to the kitchen and set it on the table beside Emily's new one. He looked at both of them together. Emily watched him from across the table quietly in the way she watched things she understood were important. He didn't feel what he had expected to feel, looking at the old drawing, the hollow grief of something irretrievably lost. He felt instead something closer to the sensation of setting down a weight he had been carrying in the same hand for so long that he had forgotten it was there. Not because the loss was gone, but because what had grown up beside the loss was real enough now, and solid enough, and lit from the inside in a way that didn't require anything to be erased or replaced or forgotten. He put both drawings side by side on the kitchen windowsill where the morning light came in. Courage, Jacob had once believed, was the willingness to hold on, to stay at the desk, to keep the salary, to maintain the structure that kept everything upright. What 12 months had taught him slowly at significant cost in a series of grocery stores and late nights and small pieces of folded paper was that courage sometimes looked like the opposite, like letting go of one thing in order to keep something you couldn't afford to lose, like trusting that if you made the right choice for the right reason, the rest of the world would find a way to catch up to you. It hadn't been clean, it hadn't been easy, and he wouldn't recommend the path to anyone who didn't have to take it. But he was here. Emily was here. And the light coming through the kitchen window was warm on both of their faces, and that morning, that was enough.